Welcome aboard the dark waters of the Night Crew podcast, where true crime meets the unknown. Each month we dive into the eerie, the unsolved, and the stories that haunt the shadows. If it's creepy, mysterious, or just plain unsettling, you'll find it here. So light your lantern, step onto the deck, and prepare to uncover what lies beneath the surface.
This podcast contains discussions of true crime, disturbing content, and mature themes that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The Night Crew podcast aims to present stories with respect to the victims and their families, and the intent is never to sensationalize tragedy, but to shed light on the unknown and unexplained. You are listening to The Night Crew, and I am your host, Katie. Welcome back. It's been about a year since we last posted our last podcast, and now we're back finally, better than ever. And my co-host Drew, my boyfriend, he is doing school and streaming and all that, so I'm just gonna be solo for a while. But regardless, I have a good episode for you all today. We're on episode 11 of The Night Crew. And just a forewarning, today's episode includes disturbing content such as graphic violence, abduction, ritual killings, and human suffering. So please listen with care. Today I'll be talking about the Ibadan Forest of Horror in Nigeria. So our story begins in Ibadan, Nigeria's largest city by landmass. It's a vibrant place with over 3.5 million residents. In March 2014, something began unraveling in a place just outside the city, Soka Forest, a stretch of dense wilderness bordering a neighborhood and a factory. Two young men, Abba and his cousin, vanished, and when the police didn't respond, the local community took action. What they found exposed a large underground world of human trafficking, body part trading, and ritual sacrifice. This place came to be known as the Ibadan Forest of Horror. And I discovered this story, or this true crime event, on TikTok actually, because I've never heard of this one. It's not very popular. I mean, it shouldn't be considering the event, but it did happen a while ago. So let's get started. A motorcyclist was called by a friend, Abba, to take him somewhere in the Soka area. He said he was in a hurry and needed to drop off someone in the Soka forest with his cousin. After dropping him off, he never returned home. On the morning of Abba's disappearance, his family received a call that he had been captured and taken to the Soka forest. On the call, Abba stated he didn't know where he was, who took him, and it looked like he was buried alive, meaning he was underground somewhere. Hysterically crying, he said he and 8 others had been kidnapped, and their captors brought them to an underground prison cell. He said they couldn't see anything, but could hear people walking above them. He explained that when they were kidnapped, the captors took all of their belongings, but they didn't realize he had a second phone on him, which is how he was calling them. Abba told them that he remembered directions to a footpath that led to the Soka forest, and that he had taken a dense stretch of wilderness on the outskirts of Ibadan. He told them to look for 2 burned-out cars that marked the beginning of the path, and if they kept walking on that path, they would eventually hear them screaming underground. So eventually, Abba's group of friends and other motorcyclists in the area began searching the area and stumbled upon the 2 burned cars and the path. Unarmed, they walked single file down the path and stopped. A man jumped out from behind a tree, yelled at them, and began firing in their direction, because he was a bodyguard for the area. The group fled the area and decided to round up 60 more men to go with them. Heading back to that general area where the path and the burned cars were, this time with guns, knives, bats. They were just prepared this time. They yelled as they went down the path, notifying anyone of their existence and that they were mad. Once out of the forest, they walked into this huge opening with a small river and saw 2 dilapidated buildings across the way. The one building was a shack, and the other looked like a warehouse with big, tall cement walls
and a chain link fence with barbed wire wrapped around the tops. Upon looking at the buildings and the river, they saw a bridge with their friend's motorcycle lying on the banks of the river. Upon walking over the bridge, they go to the black shack and open the plywood door, but there was no one inside. Regardless, the shack was stuffed full with hundreds and hundreds of articles of clothes and shoes. They went to the warehouse next and used bolt cutters to cut a hole in the fence. Walking around the perimeter, they found an entrance in the back of the building. Moving the big piece of sheet metal from the wall, they see a cement slab in one corner was elevated by rocks, kind of propping it up. At the lowest part of the slab was a wooden bowl that had dark stains inside of it, so the slab cut runoff so something was dripping off of it. The rest of the dirt floor was cluttered with bones, some with meat on them still. Surrounding the slab, they then saw malnourished people chained up to the walls. And I'll talk a little bit more about that slab further on, but you can kind of guess what the liquid was that was pouring into the bowl. Since it was dark, it was blood. So to go furthermore into what was going on within this place, like rituals and stuff, I'm going to be discussing that. Apparently, selling body parts was a huge deal on the black market, and the body parts were used in certain magic potions and charms that could grant wealth and success, which I never knew this. I didn't even know it was a popular thing to do in Nigeria. To break it down, a blacked out Jeep would get orders from people that wanted specific body parts, and at 8 p.m. every night, he would show up to the warehouse, take a victim, place them on the cement slab, and hack their limbs off, with the blood dripping down into that bowl, which they will also use as some sort of ritual or charm as well. Once they were packaged, the body parts were packaged, the man with the blacked out Jeep would take the body parts to be delivered. If the victims survived the cutting of their limbs, they were chained back up to the wall. If not, they were taken to the back of the warehouse, where they either used a guillotine to cut off people's heads, or they used a live crocodile chained to the building to finish them up, which is wild to me. Don't know how they got it, how much money they spent on it. It's just very odd that they would do that. I guess it would just hide the trace, if anything. So furthermore, about some of the rituals and magic they use, there was a money ritual. So in money rituals, they use someone's head to obtain money. It involves human sacrifice to gain sudden wealth or political power. And then there's the fetish magic, where specific body parts are believed to carry spiritual properties. And there were protection spells that involved organs buried under businesses, homes, or worn as charms. Ugh, imagine wearing an organ as a necklace just for protection. That is just so messed up. So overall, prices would vary by organ and by the age of the victim and how well the organ was doing. A human head could fetch thousands of US dollars. Children's body parts are even more valuable to ritualists because they are believed to be more pure. This isn't traditional medicine, obviously. It's an occult crime, and it fuels a horrifying economy. Some ritual beliefs were if you take a person's head, you capture their destiny or soul. Using their tongue in a potion might grant you influence or charm. The heart is believed to hold courage, loyalty, or spiritual fire. Wealthy businessmen, politicians, and ritualists place these orders through secret brokers. It's like the black web, but it's in person. Somehow, some way they made it happen. They believe that spilling blood will unlock power, and that every limb, every sacrifice is a step closer to fortune. Lastly, it was said that people would exchange their family and friends for money, which is how they obtained so many victims. People were just willing to give up their family and friends for money, or for fame, power, whatever they might want. Survivors stated that new victims were dropped off at the house daily, or the warehouse daily. They said their captors would show up to feed and beat them, and they would see their captors carry out dead bodies every once in a while. Some people say it was an underground human trafficking chain, money rituals, or black market for selling body parts. Upon searching the other buildings, they found bodies without heads, limbs scattered, human skulls, and pits filled with decomposing remains. Officials found 50 decomposing bodies scattered around the forest, and most were found in an uncompleted building. Also, 100 human skulls were found. So obviously this was something that was going on for several years, and I can't even imagine how many victims there are, because not many were saved after all this was over, which I'll go into that in a little bit. Anyways, back to the story. Eventually, the search party broke the survivors free of their restraints and decided to check the other surrounding buildings for survivors. They asked if they knew where an underground prison would be, and they didn't know. Upon searching, they found a building filled with decomposing bodies, some without heads or limbs. Also, along the forest floor, they found body parts, skulls, and more decomposed bodies around the area in the woods and whatnot. Despite searching the buildings, Abba's friends started digging numerous holes, but they never found his body. By this point, the police had arrived and questioned what was going on and why there were so many dead bodies. They found 6 survivors, and most were severely malnourished. After transporting them to the hospital, they gave their testimonies. As I said, there was really not that many survivors, which is very unfortunate. But one survivor, Cecilia, she was 72 years old, and she went missing in 2008. That means she was held captive in the forest for 6 years. In 2008, Cecilia went to the supermarket and never returned home. The crazy thing is that she was 5 hours from the forest when she went missing, meaning she didn't even live in the area. They still took her. Another survivor was a man selling native medicine. As he took a break, a group of men picked him up, threw him in their van, and accused him of violating environmental law. The men posed as government officials on duty and say that he looked like a mad person. They transported him to the Soka forest and chained him to the wall with other captives. Another woman was standing in front of her house when a group of men came up to her and said she was needed somewhere, therefore taking her to the forest. Another survivor, just a boy when taken, never spoke again. I don't blame him. It's horrible PTSD in the making. Overall, the 6 survivors were in critical condition due to being emaciated, covered in scars and open wounds, chained by the neck or ankles. Some were missing limbs, and another woman hadn't spoken in years. So the victims were taken to a local hospital and treated, but most of them disappeared from public view shortly after. Their families were reportedly warned to keep quiet, probably by government officials, I would imagine, or they were bribed to keep it a secret with money. Cecilia, the 72-year-old woman who had been missing since 2008, was taken in by distant relatives, but never fully recovered mentally. She had lost all sense of time, and unfortunately, she passed away in 2016. One man missing for nearly 5 years was so malnourished and incoherent, even his mother didn't believe it was him at first. He spent the next months locked in a small room, afraid to open doors, eating only once a day, and screaming in his sleep. Others suffered from psychosis, amnesia, or crippling PTSD. I'm sure anxiety, depression, all of that is in there as well. There was no long-term support from the government to these victims, no housing, no therapy, just survival and silence. The government offered no help to these victims at all. Regarding the victims' families, many never got closure. They weren't allowed to claim the bodies, they were kept from the site, and some demand to identify loved ones' clothing from the piles found in the shack, but they were denied access. Even worse, 2 people were shot and killed during a protest outside the forest gates when the military blocked them from entering. So obviously there's something bigger going on than just a black market ordeal. It definitely has to do with government officials, politicians, and whatnot, because they were really keeping this a secret. I just feel horrible for the victims' families because if their loved one died in there, they never got to know if they were in there or not because they wouldn't allow them on the crime scene. So how did they get away with this? The building was in a forest, but it was surrounded by a community of residents and a plastic bottle company making the buildings. The ones in charge were mad people. That's how they got away with all the killings and torture. However, this wasn't a hospital, it was a mass grave, a slaughterhouse hidden in plain sight. The owners also targeted those with no strong family ties, mental illness, street vendors. They targeted travelers unfamiliar with the city, like Cecilia, or people who wouldn't be missed right away. So who is to blame? As I have mentioned before, the government. So the government demolished the buildings 2 to 3 weeks after it was discovered. By the time forensics could investigate the area, all evidence was destroyed. The bones were destroyed, clothes, all of that, building gone. The DNA had been contaminated, bones were broken by machinery, and families were already mourning empty graves. Many say the demolition of the site was done to cover up the scope of killings. About 3 months later, a school was built on the land that once homed the House of Horror, which I read online. It was more like a community college type of thing, but I just can't believe they built something on that land so soon after such a horrible incident that occurred. So that just makes me think the government really wanted this covered up for many reasons. The survivors say the captors were organized. Some wore military boots, some even carried badges. They moved with discipline, they had a lot of strict rules. There are strong suspicions that wealthy individuals and possibly politicians funded or protected the operation. In many cases like this across West Africa, ritual sacrifice and politics are disturbingly intertwined. Some believe the Soka killings were a part of the 2015 election year preparation, a spiritual investment to secure victory through blood offerings. It's speculated that one of the owners of the buildings had political power. As for the public officials, they made a very brief appearance at the scene, but there was no National Day of Mourning, no victim lists, and no investigative task force. Instead, the government focused on land disputes and media control. For a few days, the story went global, House of Horrors in Nigeria, but within a week, the headlines disappeared. There were no documentaries, no major international follow-ups, and local outlets that tried to investigate the ownership of the land or the identities of suspects were reportedly pressured to stop. 7 men were arrested, but no convictions occurred and no one was held accountable. Way more than 10 years later, no justice has been served to this day. I just think it's awful how I couldn't even find a documentary about this. I did watch a YouTube video discussing the event. That's like the closest thing you're gonna get to a documentary. There was a lot of websites that talked about this though. A lot of websites or news outlets in different countries except Africa. So that was interesting to see. But yeah, this event, this story is very under wraps. No one really knows about it, which is unfortunate because so many horrible things happen to these people. It's basically an underground torture chamber for all of them. So there's many, many, many different theories, and like I said, I really believe it had to do with the government and political power, which is how it never got out to the public. It's because of them. But either way, I'll go through the other theories as well that I found online. So there was the mass grave theory. Locals say this wasn't the only site. There could have been 5 other buildings where these rituals were happening. Rumors spread about underground tunnels connecting the forest to other hidden killing chambers. Some claim 3 or more houses were used across Ibadan, but only one was ever exposed. To this day, no comprehensive dig has taken place. Some believe the demolished warehouse now sits on top of a mass grave, which I also think this theory is true. There's, with that many skulls and bodies found, there has to be more tunnels that lead far away to some other place that they never discovered, or maybe they destroyed the tunnels so they wouldn't find out where else they're working. That is definitely one of the top theories. And then we have the other theory of political ritual killings. As I had mentioned earlier several times, it was a theory that the killings were part of a ritual operation tied to political figures seeking power, wealth, or protection ahead of Nigeria's 2015 elections. Some supporting claims are the survivors reported the captors speaking about deliveries and sacrifices. The forest was demolished quickly before a thorough investigation. Arrested suspects were released without conviction. Definitely government-based. Because just on that fact alone, no one was sent to prison, no one was sent to jail, no court, nothing. No one was held accountable for this. Then there was the organ trade network cover-up. So the warehouse was a part of a large organ trafficking network, and its exposure threatened powerful people involved in the trade. Supporting claims for this, victims had precise amputations, skilled removal of organs and limbs. A survivor said buyers came with specific orders. Some bodies were missing only internal organs, suggesting whoever was cutting them up had some sort of medical knowledge to keep them alive, because a lot of them did survive this brutality. Police and soldiers restricted access to evidence and bodies. Overall, the motive was to make a profit off of the body parts, since they sell for thousands of dollars on the black market. And like I said before, they're used for a lot of rituals, magic, charms, all of that stuff that they believe in over there. Another theory was military or paramilitary involvement. The theory is that the killings were protected by people in military uniform or affiliated with law enforcement. Supporting claims with this, eyewitnesses saw guards in military-style boots, some carrying badges, as I mentioned earlier. Survivors said they were picked up by men posing as environmental or mental health officials. Police responded only after the public discovered the site, despite earlier reports of screams. The motive was to shield the operation and led legitimacy to kidnappings by posing as authorities. So essentially, they were going out and telling these people these are the military, they're concerned with the environment, they have this mental health hospital and they can take you there and they're going to help you. That's all a lie. This whole thing was a lie to keep it a secret. And the fact that the police had all these reports of screaming and whatnot, even in the late hours of the night. I heard one story, there was a party outside, and in the middle of the night you can just hear all the screaming coming from there, and despite all the police reports, all the screaming you would hear, I'm sure the body parts in the forest, and still, the police did not go and investigate it or clean it up until this group of 60 men and other people started going there and started to find out what was actually going on. And one of the last theories I have was human experimentation or cult initiation. Some speculate that the building was used for human experimentation, cult, anything having to do with being inducted into a cult, or torture rituals beyond sacrifice. This went far deeper than profit. Some supporting claims a few survivors had strange markings on their bodies, burns, symbols, or repeated wounds. Locals claimed strange chants and bonfires occurred late at night. Some bones had clean holes bored into the skulls, not consistent with blunt trauma. All in all, this whole thing, it wasn't random. Someone built this, someone funded it, and someone made sure the world didn't look too closely. What remains is rumor, trauma, and an open wound. The survivors are still scattered, the victims' families are still searching. The forest, once filled with screams, is now quiet, but the horror lives on. Thank you for listening to the Night Crew again. I'm sorry it's been so long, it's been a year. We have just been so busy with life and work and everything in between. But going along with the victims again, if you want to honor the victims of the Ibadan Forest of Horror, share this episode, say their names, keep asking questions. This is like kind of an unsolved mystery, partly because the government was so adamant on getting rid of every single piece of evidence they had. So, with that being said, I'm going to try to post an episode twice a month. I'm going to try my hardest on Sundays. But regardless, I'm Katie, and this was The Forest of Horror. And remember, truth is stranger than fiction and twice as terrifying. See you next time on The Night Crew.